This program, while curated to help you improve your health, contains general advice and should not replace the individual advice of your medical practitioner.
So what would you recommend people to use instead of sugar?
Look, I think the natural sugars and things personally are enough. And when we start to wean off adding sugar, you'll start to find there's a whole new area of our flavour palette that opens up.
Why don't you like using the word fuel?
Because I think it serves the wrong connotations to what food is. I don't want it to be seen as just a means to get by.
So it's not difficult for people to eat healthy, right?
No, I don't believe so at all. I think it's difficult for people who've never done it before to get motivated.
In life, it's normal to have ups and downs. But what do we do when we get stuck? I've always been fascinated by the healing journey. Why do some people get better while others fail to make the shift? Welcome to the Expert Series, where you'll meet 25 of the world leaders in health and wellness, discussing their passions and what it takes to make your shift.
There's an electrical feeling in the room.
I had to be a mom. It was so important to me.
I've always been a pain in the butt, and I love that.
I knew that I wanted to help people.
I'm Katherine Maslen, and this is The Shift.
Hi, I'm Katherine Maslen, naturopath, author and host of The Shift. In the Expert Series, we share the insight, stories and expertise of each of our amazing experts. You might have heard them on season 1 of The Shift, where we took snippets of these interviews and put them together into the series for you. If you haven't listened to season 1 yet, I'd highly recommend listening to episode 1 of this podcast to get the latest on what it takes to make a shift in your gut health. We'll provide a link in the show notes. In this episode, we have Dan Churchill. Dan is a celebrity chef originating from Sydney, Australia, but he now calls New York home. As well as being the author of 3 best-selling cookbooks, Dan is a regular TV personality, being featured on Good Morning America, the ABC's The Chew, and on the Food Network regularly. He also hosted the docu-series Surfing the Menu, which aired on the Discovery Channel. Dan co-founded the New York restaurant Charlie Street, a casual dining restaurant that serves healthy farm-to-table eats. I loved Dan's laid-back and wholesome approach to food, and I hope that you do too. First up, I asked Dan to introduce himself.
So my name's Dan Churchill. I'm a chef, formerly from the northern beaches of Sydney. And I started cooking some awesome recipes that are super simple and created some cookbooks out of it that led me to New York City. So now I'm living here and been so for the past 3.5 or bit over 3 years, where I've continued to build a brand that's, around easy ways to have healthy meals and done so by empowering yourself to do it. And at the same time, I've launched a couple of different businesses that have all encompassed the same vision, which is really exciting.
So tell me about the journey. To start with, when did you decide you wanted to be a chef?
Initially, actually, I was 12 years old when my family and I started to cook very consistently together, and I took that as a really creative outlet for myself. And so that's something that, as we grew up, I just loved being with my family and cooking more. But it wasn't until I was probably 19, 20 that I really started to have a think about it. And this is really because I finished my master's in exercise science at university. I did so because I wanted to be more specific with helping people with their human performance. So athletes, teams, different codes, and then individuals with their own weight loss, for example. And I love the ability to have an impact on people. I think that truly was my motivating factor. But then after realizing there was a disconnect between, athletes and nutrition and actually how to apply the nutrition, I was like, well, I'm doing recipes, and then the recipes were really easy and they were and then the athletes were able to, actually accomplish doing them. And then individuals like my friends wanted to know how to cook as well. And so after I created a couple of cookbooks built around these same, principles, I realized that I loved being healthy. I loved being a trainer. I loved being a health coach, but I could truly have an impact on the world by being a chef. And so my initial thought of being a chef was, 100 hours a week in the kitchen, which is what I ended up doing, big part of my life. But then, I realized that the new age chef didn't have to be that. And so that's how I've, evolved and kind of paved my own way.
So how did you end up in the US of A?
So United States of America, very interesting place to be. It's awesome. I've always wanted to be here. I've loved watching like American Pie, Remember the Titans, all these like American movies, Van Wilder, shout out to my man Ryan Reynolds. So like, these things were really what fascinated me and my two brothers. So I always envisioned being here. I always thought that what I had in mind to have an impact could really be done here. It just interested me. And after doing some segments on Sunrise and some other morning shows and doing a couple of things in Australia, I was noticed by an American publisher. And so I flew over to have a meeting and then signed a book deal.
So what's life like living in New York City?
It's like jumping into Dan Ricciardo's Formula One car and just being fast-paced everywhere you go. It really is. It's, I was recently back in Australia for Christmas and 3 weeks of just sunshine and pretty much just wearing board shorts and having a coffee whilst working on my laptop overseeing DY Beach was absolutely awesome. But, you come back here and it's just, it's like even right now, it's actually technically slow in the sense that no one's in the streets at this time of day because it's, for those listening, it's minus 12 today, but it feels like minus 26 degrees Celsius. But, the energy of opportunity is amazing. There's if someone doesn't know how to do something, the next person does. If someone's there to, everyone's there with an ambition and wants to help. And I think I love that. I love being a part of that. We're also 6 hours from Europe, which is remarkably different from when I'm living in Sydney. And I think the most awesome thing about living here is I'm genuinely, just like every other Australian here, a representative of our country. And we get to proudly talk about how awesome Australia is. And people get to, get to know us and see our awesome brand. So whether it be a cafe, a restaurant, the way we work, we have our own brand that we're representing, and I'm proud to actually be that person and be amongst awesome like-minded Aussies, having a crack and representing our country.
So tell me about your new restaurant, Charlie Street.
So Charlie Street is a healthy, fast, casual with an Aussie attitude. It's down in Nolita, which is north of Little Italy. So for those who picked up on that, yes, that's an acronym, or that's one way that New York likes to separate its different suburbs or little nooks. And so, we opened up about 5.5 months ago and we're having some fun. So essentially our business is about solving a problem, and Charlie Street is to deliver a healthy, fast, affordable meals to you and make you in a way that's super fun, really. We love people coming here and just want to sit and hang out. Even if they buy coffee, it's cool to see that they love the vibe of what we're trying to achieve. So it's a scalable concept. So everything that I've set up from a business perspective is to be replicated. If something's too skill-based, I can't do it, because if I can't do it here, I can't do it in multiple locations. And the main purpose of that is because I've always wanted to have a tangible effect on people. I have a digital and social media audience, but it's also to have a new audience that come by and being able to put something on the menu and say which farmer it's from, and that farmer is not at one location, is at 5 locations, and then their awesome passion comes through. So that's something that's I envision with Charlie Street, is to have it grow to the point where it's representing not just what we stand for, but the partners of food outlets and like-minded individuals that we're fortunate to work with.
And it looks amazing and the food is phenomenal. So well done. How did you get into healthy eating?
I've always been just living in the northern beaches of Sydney, being active, having 2 brothers, always been active. Love playing rugby. I think rugby probably was it. I love persisting in, rugby, 2 training sessions a week, 3 weight sessions, and then a Sunday session of running the sand dunes in Palm Beach. Like, you'd always be active. And as a byproduct of that, I always wanted to be able to, look back and go, well, I have a crack at this. And I think that obviously fueling my body is right. I don't like using the word fuel, but putting the right food into your body is huge.
Yeah. Why don't you like using the word fuel?
Because I think it serves as the wrong connotations to what food is. I don't want it to be seen as just a means to get by. Food is such a beautiful part of your day, and I never want it to seem as if it's something that we have to do. It's something we should want to do. And whether it be on your own or with a friend or with your family or some of your closest people or a large table, you have this moment of your day where you eat a few times, or maybe one if you're that person, and it's absolutely beautiful. Just to sit down, reflect and enjoy. And obviously the endorphin rush and the serotonin release of eating something super tasty is very good for your health. But it's a very happy time, and I never want to think that's like, I'm putting this into my body because I have to go to the gym class situation.
I love this. So let's have a conversation about this, because I love it how you're speaking about healthy, nourishing food in that way that it's giving you an endorphin rush, because traditionally it's like people would think of sugar or treats or, those type of things.
Sure.
What kind of food do you serve? What would you consider like healthy food?
Colourful, dense food, like colourfully dense food. So you touched on it before. I'm big on the endocrine system, so hormones. I think that we talk about macronutrients and all this stuff quite often, and it's 100% true. But one thing we forget is the impact our hormones have on our system. So, eating a dark chocolate cube once every so often is actually fantastic for you, because it allows not only the serotonin to be released, but your endorphin rushes, which allow all your cells to work optimally around your body. They're just killing life when you have that piece of chocolate. And if you never have that, and if you're constantly stressing yourself out and increasing your cortisol levels, meaning your fat oxidation is being impeded and all these other fascinating things, we forget that we're meant to be enjoying what we're doing. And that's why I always say it's so important you're enjoying your food in a happy environment, because you can digest it much more easily. So, when it comes to my food, I talk about color. I want people to not think about numbers. I don't like the idea of mathematics before I eat. I love doing maths, but the idea to sit down and think about, this is, 270 macros of this and, minus everything, and just take away from the actual enjoyment of food. But instead, if you make it really simple, I've got beautiful dense orange, greens, reds, purples. I know I'm getting an array of nutrient dense, vitamins and minerals, not to mention the amount of... Yeah. Okay, here's the simple part. If you have a lot of color in your food, it relates to two things. Nutrients, so the more saturated the food is in color, the more saturated it is in nutrients. But also, that means there's more receptors that require us to attach to from our flavor receptors. So therefore, the more color there is, the more density, the more nutrients, the more importantly to that though, the more flavor there is, which is ultimately, if there's more color in something, it tastes better. So that's a win.
When you moved here, what was it like looking at the health of the US comparative to Australia?
I think one thing that Australians can be proud of is, as much as we hear about, the obesity rates and all those kinds of things, I think Australia's mentality towards health is much more ahead of the game than, I haven't been to every country, but I would say a high significant part of the world. I'm proud to say that. I think we as Australians, we have, a really good sporting environment, a really cool landscape for exercise and fitness. Obviously, we do still have that obesity thing to actually act on, and a big part of that's education, and I really look forward to assisting in that and in whatever way we can. But coming here to the US, it's interesting because New York is not America. New York is a melting pot of multicultures, just like Australia is in general. It's not until I hit middle America that I really understood it. I was doing some shows for TV, and I'd go to the hotel that I'd be staying at, and I'd ask where can I go to eat, and the recommendations was just completely something I wasn't used to. It's not like I wouldn't go to a fast food outlet. It's not. The idea of going to McDonald's or KFC was very rare for me growing up, and I really thank my parents for that. And mum and dad were most indirect supporters, but we always generally had home cooked meals, which is great. But coming here, the understanding of what food is and how to get food and all these and what's accessible is mind-boggling to me. And I don't think they're doing it. It's very. One thing I'm not going to do is come here and tell them what they're doing wrong, because they have been brought up in a different environment to us, and for me, for that matter. I simply look at the opportunity of what they're doing and find ways to show alternatives and be a part of that. Because, I didn't grow up here in America. I grew up in Australia. And so it's really important that whenever someone comes over here with any business, it's important you relate to the situation. It's like someone coming into your homeland and telling you how to do something isn't exactly the most appropriate thing. But if someone came here and said, hey, this is awesome what you guys do, but here's another way you could do it if you wanted to. And that's the approach I'm going to be taking.
So it's looking at, rather than making people feel guilty or scaring them, is taking a positive approach and going, hey, here's a better way, and here's some information.
100%. And I don't mean that as a strategy. I genuinely think that's a better option, because I've got to be absolutely happy with the fact that I can't help every single person. But the more I come across in a way that shows your options and genuine, and generally goes, hey, I know you guys have been doing it this way, and you are fixated on these things for your whole life, and that's awesome. Here's another way. If I'm like that, I'm actually accepting it both ways. I feel I'm doing my right to actually also appreciate the fact that I didn't grow up in the same educational system as someone else. I think that's important for us all to know.
Have you listened to season 1 of The Shift? If you're enjoying the expert series, you'll love season 1. where we deep dive into the field of gut health with 25 of the world leaders in this area. Head back to your podcast app and find episode 1. It's a great place to start.
What I want to know is, what are people not realising about their food before it gets to their plate?
It obviously depends on the location, but my people talk to me, what's your food diet? Or again, the diet word to me is something I don't like using, but plan per se. And I say that I like to think of it as a whole food approach where I minimize processes. I know what's in my food by the ingredients, and which is generally speaking the one ingredient. So I think a misconception can be when they go sit at a restaurant and they ask for something, unless the restaurant asks the chef what he knows where it's coming from. Now, I'm not going to say go sit down at a restaurant and before you eat, go speak to the chef and say, where did this chicken come from? Or where did this broccoli come from? My point is, it's always important that you do have an understanding of where your food comes from. And so for me, I can tell you on each plate which farmer each of these ingredients came from. For an everyday individual, you don't need to know that. But if you can find a place where, there's a correct labeling, or yourself can explain what the ingredients are on the label of a can per se. Like coconut milk is about the only thing I get out of a can. And and tomatoes sometimes, because I think San Marzano tomatoes are fantastic. It's another situation. But my point is, if you can pronounce it, if you know what it is, awesome. If you can't, that's always the biggest issue in my opinion, because there's so many different sweeteners out there. There's so many different sugars, and, simply the word sugar just doesn't mean it has no sugar in it,
So what would you recommend people to use instead of sugar?
Look, I think the natural sugars and things personally are enough. And when we start to wean off adding sugar, you'll start to find there's a whole new area of our flavor palette that opens up because it's been blinded. Confectionery sugar is obviously not good on many accounts. Most importantly for me, it affects your flavor. So I'm someone who thinks toothpaste is sweet. So because I just don't have sugar, the idea of having, if I ever have a cocktail, it's not lime and soda because I'm trying to be healthy. It's like it's going to be a tequila and something bitters and no syrup, because I just think naturally to me that's it. Like my sugar is berries. Straight up. Or if I want to make it sweeter, I roast the berries because that extracts more moisture and makes it naturally sweeter. Good tip. So when it comes to sugar, the alternatives to me are less refined. So obviously honey, but make sure you know the right honey sources, because we've seen, particularly recently in Australia, it's been a bit of an issue there. Same with your maple syrup. I think is probably your best alternative sweetener. It's also vegan, and obviously there's agave, but I tend not to use agave. I like to use maple syrup. I think it goes further. I'm actually, if you have the ability to do so, if you ever juice sweet potato and then reduce it in a syrup, it becomes a nice natural sweetener.
Ooh, That's a great tip. Yeah. So how long would you cook it for?
So juice your sweet potato and then, reduce it on a low heat for probably about an hour, I'd say.
Yum.
Yeah, you get a nice little glaze out of it. It's pretty tasty. We actually use that to sweeten our banana bread and our muffins upstairs.
What other pro tips do you have?
I think roasting is a really good alternative to cooking. Firstly, it's easy, and sheet pan dinners are fantastic, but just a little bit of olive oil on top. Well, not a little, don't be shy. Olive oil, salt and pepper, and you're roasting away instead of bathing in oil, which is awesome. I think, if you can avoid sugar the first thing, that's great. If you can, not every week, but start to pick up an ingredient once a month and learn more about it, I think that's great. But most importantly, cook with color. So you look at your plate. If you're not cooking with the rainbow throughout the week, then you're clearly missing out on one color. Then you're probably missing out on a micronutrient that could be essential to your life. So the other thing is, I always say is, remove refined sugars. Talk about cooking with color, and listen to your body. This is a big one. People often follow a diet or a trend because they perceive it to be good for you. But how often do you eat something and all of a sudden just not feel right afterwards and go, hang on a second, I've been on this meal plan for X amount of time and I've been having all these great meals. I've been keto, I've been vegan, I've been paleo, whatever it is. And all of a sudden they go, actually, something doesn't agree with me, but I'm eating healthy, so it's fine. Here's an interesting one I always say. It's chickpeas are a fantastic source of so many nutrients. They are quite versatile in how you can use them, and they make a fantastic hummus. I love them. But unfortunately, not everyone can digest chickpeas yet, because they're so tasty and they're vegan and generally speaking, they're allowed in a lot of healthier, they're perceived to be healthy, we continue to have them. Now, I can have them, so it's fine. Like for me, I'm fine with it. My girlfriend can have them, my mum, all that. There's been a couple of my friends, though, that all of a sudden go, oh, I feel a bit sick after having that. And this is all a healthy meal. I'm like, well, healthy to me is not necessarily healthy to you. So my biggest tip out of all these 3 tips is just listen to your body. So you may think gluten-free is good for you, but you may actually do really well with having a sourdough. It's fantastically filled with probiotic foods. You may be having oligosaccharides, and it's not the best thing for you, but you're able to digest, and the idea is if you listen to your body and actually respond, it can have a pretty big impact without you realizing.
What do you know about gut health?
Gut health. Well, your gut is effectively, I like to call it your first brain. Everyone says it's the second brain. I like to call it the first brain. I think I like to think my brain thinks second after, well, firstly, the food gets to my stomach quicker than it gets to my brain. So therefore, it's clearly not knows what's going on first. But yeah, there's obviously a lot of nerves going on down in the stomach, and the lining of the gut is super important. I'm big on probiotics for me. I know that having really good solid yogurts that have been really well, going through the right processes, and fermentable foods, all that is really good for me. And I love it. I think it's, my gut's pretty friendly. He talks to me every now and then, but essentially I feel that because I'm putting my body through such a rigorous amount of color, it knows how to break down food. So every now and then that I have my pastas and things like that, it's like, hey, this is different, but I'm going to get through this. So I'm really big on understanding your gut. Just like I said, listen to your body. And, we talk about fiber. And if you didn't know, fiber is not something our body actually digests. So the microbiome in our gut is what digests it. So there's little microorganisms. And for them, they turn that, their byproduct of digesting that is that fluid that allows you to actually digest food. So firstly, know that if those little legends of workers, if they're not eating the right foods, then it's going to affect your digestion. So you have to feed them the right ways. Now, what the right foods are, again, determines what your body type is. But if it is someone who digests fiber or needs more fiber, then just make sure you're having the right amount of fiber, whether it be the greens or the prebiotics, the probiotics. And that's essentially why a big part of what I do is also talk about things like my brands that I work with that are really big on these kind of things. Like Athletic Greens is a fantastic example of that. So, every morning I have Athletic Greens, and for me it works, and it's sustained health, and I have prebiotics, probiotics, and all that kind of stuff. And you can get that from ingredients yourself, and that's what I love. It's fantastic. It's my gut loves me. High five, gut.
How do people make their own probiotic foods?
Yeah, great question. Probiotic foods, firstly, there's things you can do, obviously make your own yogurts and things like that, or just source really good quality yogurts. You can make sauerkraut. A big one is kombucha. Kombucha is huge. Fermentable foods are pretty simple. Just make like a nice pickle. I don't like to use sugar, so I like to use like either a little bit of maple syrup or sweet potato syrup. So maple syrup is probably more accessible with, some sort of vinegar. And for me, it's like, the longer the better. So make sure you get a little jar, make sure it's sealed up quite nice, and over a couple week period you get this beautiful fermentable situation going on. Obviously sourdough is a great one. I'll be doing sourdough tutorials on my website, on my YouTube and contents. That's a good one as well. But yeah, it's a pretty simple process. It's effectively mix everything into whatever your solution is, mix everything in, whether it be cabbage, any form of slaw that you want to turn into a sauerkraut, or even a fermentable agent like a beets. Oh my God, beets ferment so well.
Want to look deeper into your own health? Our virtual naturopathic team help people from all over the world to shift their health and their life. We offer a 90-minute online discovery and diagnostic session where you can find out where you're at, why you're here, and what you need to do about it. Everyone is so unique, and sometimes it can help to have someone break down your journey and see where it is that you need to head next. To find out more, go to theshiftclinic.com and click on Shift with Us.
The Shift!
So it's not difficult for people to eat healthy, right?
No, I don't believe so at all. I think it's difficult for people who've never done it before to get motivated, but like anything, you create a routine and a habit and understanding and the support structure, and it becomes pretty second nature. It's like changing anything. It's like if someone asked me to all of a sudden if someone told me that having McDonald's every day was actually healthy for you, it'd be tough for me because I've never done that. So it's like changing a habit, and that's not a lot of people like change. But once you get used to it, get into a routine, learn how to, people say eating healthy takes time. It really doesn't actually. I know that I'm a guy who hasn't got any family in terms of children, so I know I don't have those responsibilities, but I'm not saying this is the same for everyone, but I've got a couple of different businesses that are technically my babies that still require my attention at 2 a.m. in the morning. So not that it relates. I really don't. I respect parents, and I cannot believe my mom and dad put up with the 3 boys of Churchill hood. Anyway, so my point is though, there can be times where you can control the controllable, which is something I talk about all the time. Control the controllable. If I know I've got half an hour of downtime, I'm going to roast vegetables and have them in the fridge just in case that, I need something quickly, I have them. Simple things like that, or prep ahead of time.
What would the world look like if it was changed through food?
That's a really good question. I would think at moments of the day, everyone would be genuinely more engaged with each other, and it would slow down when it comes to food time. So the world would see that food has the ability to actually heal and communicate, not just what we see on camera, but genuinely for those who, rather than get food delivered to those less fortunate, provide them with the skills and the resources to create their own food. So in third world countries where we're delivering food through these amazing charities and organizations, create like a kitchen where they're learning the skill set, all these kinds of things. And where food is abundant, whether it be people place more emphasis on drought, for example, and the impact that has. And you see people stopping people from throwing cigarettes on the ground because they know the impact it's going to have on nutrients in the soil and the fish and all the marine life. Understanding our importance we place on global warming and how this all ties back into the circle of how we are able to live. I think as we continue to build in this new sustainable landscape and the healthy movement, food is going to be a forefront of that. And by changing the world, using the food as a tool source to communicate, you'll see multiple issues around the world start to really take more, prominent position in the media.
You know how some people, they're a bit disconnected from food. Like they'll say, I don't really care. I could eat the same thing every 3 times a day. I just need to eat to live kind of thing. How do you help to ignite that spark in them and get them to start falling in love with food again?
Yeah, it's interesting because it happens quite a lot, to be honest. I think first thing, you can't force something on someone. You really can't. As I said earlier, I have to be okay with the fact that I can't help every single person. Just like I have to be okay with the fact that my food isn't going to be liked by every single person on this planet. I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with the fact that no one's going to put out the food that I want the way that I want, just like I would. And so you got to be okay with these things. But what I can do is provide opportunities to learn and give them all the opportunities before they make that decision. So if someone comes to me and is clearly not in the right headspace to take on, awareness per se, it's not the right time. But every now and then, if I'm sitting at a table and someone's told me earlier, I'm like, I just got to do this, I want to learn more about why they've got to do it like this, then initiate a transition period of education. Because if I went straight into going, these are other options you have on your table, as opposed to saying, why are you actually stressed, or why are you in a hurry? And then maybe you slow down and you show the benefit of the result as opposed to how to change, you get more of a positive effect, much more of a positive effect.
Yeah, cool. I have one last question for you. If you could give people one piece of advice to make a shift in their health or their life, what would it be?
I think, the easiest one, in all honesty, is honestly reduce your sugar. I think that's just an easy one, a really low-hanging fruit. But I think ultimately, I think what I always do say to people is, how do you see yourself in 20 years doing what you're doing? For those who really ask me to help them, that's kind of a way I put the shift back on their cells. So I obviously the easiest one to change is just cut out sugar 100%. And it's a weaning process. Some people do require cold turkey, but just reduce the amount of confectionery sugar. I'm not talking about all sugar. I'm just confectionery sugar. It's a simple one, but one thing I do say is have a think about the next 20 years of your life and, how that's going to affect your family if you continue doing what you're doing. And not to say that, they're having, bad life choices. They're just eating a certain way that they've been uneducated on. So, yeah, I think that's, for me, the simple approach would be the sugar one. The other one was just to put themselves in their shoes in 20 years' time. And you generally speaking, they have to think about it for a bit, and that's going to take time. But, it's a good starting point.
There was some really great advice in here from Dan, so let's go over a few of the key take-homes. Number 1, we need to look at food as more than fuel. Sure, food does fuel us and give us energy, but it means so much more than this. As Dan said, food can be such a beautiful part of our day, and it can really enrich our lives in a meaningful way. Number 2, colourful food is usually rich in nutrients and disease-fighting phytochemicals. A very simple way to up your nutrition is to just focus on eating more vibrantly coloured foods. If you look at your plate and it's brown and white, this is going to be very devoid of what you need to stay healthy. Number 3, when you begin to wean off sugar, your taste receptors change and you can discover a whole new flavour palette that was not there before. Looking at these subtle things as signs of health and paying attention to how your food tastes leads to a richer experience and more awareness in your body. Learning is great, but doing is better. Here are 3 things that you can change as a result of listening to this conversation. Number 1, eat a rainbow. As we mentioned, often colourful foods are much higher in nutrition. Some of my favourite foods that are super nutrient rich are blueberries and other berries for that matter, capsicums or peppers, kiwi fruit, papaya, fresh herbs, spinach, pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, and nuts. Number 2, if you're having trouble cutting out refined sugar from your diet, then using a sugar replacement can be a stepping stone for some. My favourite natural sweeteners are honey, pure maple syrup, or birch xylitol. Number 3, try something new this week, perhaps a vegetable that you've never eaten or a new style of cooking that you haven't tried before. And when you eat it, really take the time to sit down and savour it, experiencing the flavours. Food is an experience, and the way that we approach our meal times really sets up our relationship with food. What a nourishing conversation that was with Dan Churchill. To check him out further, go to danchurchill.com. That's DANCHURCHILL.com, where you'll find his cookbooks, recipes, and more. As we approach the end of the Expert series, I want to say a big thank you to all of our listeners. The shift was born out of the desire to help you make a shift in your health and your life. And the feedback, reviews, and messages that I receive mean so much to me. If you haven't rated and reviewed us yet, please head to iTunes because I'd love to hear from you. And of course, please share this with anyone you think needs to make a shift in their life. In the next episode of the Expert series, we have nutritionist Steph Lowe, who is an expert in helping people get their health on track by becoming fat adapted, as well as working with performance athletes.
Coming up on The Shift.
Is gut health important when you're looking at performance?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're not doing like the carbohydrate thing with these endurance events, what is the approach then that you're taking?
So the approach is to become fat adapted, and what that means is you can access your body fat for fuel.
Where do you see the future of health?
I think my child's generation are going to be the healthiest yet.
Do you have a question you'd like to see answered? Go to theshiftclinic.com/group, jump in the community and ask us.